morning. It is 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And may I just say to friends and foes alike, if you're listening in Wales, Gethin in Anglesey puts it best. He says, it's going to be a difficult morning. One of my highlights of the day, the James O'Brien Show. We're thinking of renaming it, Gethin. We're thinking of calling it the James O'Brien Experience. One of the highlights of my day starts at 10 a.m. and so does the Wales versus Iran World Cup game. I've settled for listening to you on my iPhone LBC app, the global player, no doubt, placed strategically next to my good ear whilst watching the game. I will be as hyped up following the national anthem as I am when you take on the Brexit brigade. The neighbours may get confused about what I'm actually shouting or cheering at. So, go Wales. Borodar. 4 minutes after 10 is the time. There's another text as well. What does this mean? Come on, James, don't let us down. I haven't even started. I haven't drawn breath. That's a bit like sending someone a letter that says we know what you're up to. Just sending it randomly to someone. And then they spend. There was a great apocryphal story in the 1970s. Someone sent a letter as a joke to a mate saying, "We know what you're up to," and he fled the country. What do you mean? Come on, James, don't let us down. What am I supposed? What challenge am I supposed to be rising to at 5 after 10 on a Friday morning? Come on, you can't just send me messages that say that. Come on, James, don't let us down. It makes me think I've missed something. We went in pretty hard on the Michelle Moan story yesterday. I don't think I've pulled any punches, particularly on any issues this week. I certainly, if we do talk about Matt Hancock later in the programme, I certainly won't be contributing to any putative rehabilitation. I think it's despicable that he's sort of attempting to redefine himself as some sort of light entertainment watermelon. I'm not. So what do you mean, come on, James, don't let us down? What could it be? And then another one. I don't know. 6 minutes after 10 is the time. What are we going to talk about? Well, look. It's a funny day today. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's a strange day for news. GPs. Shall I give you one of those little examples of the British media? Do you like my little examples of how the British media works? Here's one. So, front page of the Daily Mail. GPs vote to shut doors at just 5 p.m. So, it's GPs next in the firing line. I always find it fascinating. Sorry, let me rephrase. We always find it fascinating, don't we? Who the sort of red meat, gammon and pineapple provocateurs are going to go after next. There is literally nobody who could be off limits. You might think, for example, well, they'd never go after a Tory MP, but they would. They would, if they thought that it would sell a few papers. Doctors. They're just sitting there in Kensington in a newspaper office thinking, let's turn our readers against doctors now. Down with doctors. Doctors, a profession that is hemorrhaging qualified staff because morale is so low. So what better way to demonstrate your patriotic commitment to the National Health Service at the level most people engage with it most, at GP level, by, attacking doctors. Incredible. These people are psychopaths. And still they march. And the same story reaches the Times under this headline. GPs' long hours are anti-women and should be cut, say doctors. So the doctors themselves trying to find ways to draw more people into a profession that is in desperate need of people being drawn into it. So they're going to lobby the government to cut their core hours to 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., i.e. 9 to 5. There is a reason why 9 to 5 is a figure of speech. There is a reason why 9 to 5 is a Dolly Parton song. There is a reason why 9 to 5 is the phrase used to describe the average working day since time immemorial. But not, of course, for the Daily Mail. I digress slightly. I don't think we're going to talk about that today, but I just thought I'd give you a little reminder of the effort that is put into persuading you to hate people who really don't deserve your hate by the people who you should hate. The more you should hate someone, the harder they work to make you hate someone else. Whether it's a Tory Prime Minister or a Daily Mail editor, the more you should actually hate them for what they've done to you and your life and your country, the more effort they will put into persuading you that it's actually somebody else you should really hate. And if hate is too strong a word, then pick your own. Because it's not doctors who are on the front page of the other increasingly unhinged right-wing newspaper this morning. It is, wait for it, No? Anybody? Yes. It is foreign students. Actually, no, it's on the front of the Times. That's not increasingly unhinged. And it's not the newspaper that is turning you against them. It is Rishi Sunak. It is the Prime Minister, who said yesterday that all options were on the table after it emerged that total immigration had reached an estimated 1.1 million in the year to June, with 560,000 people leaving the country and leaving a sort of net migration at around 504,000. EU immigration now is a net minus, by the way. So, and the front page of the Express, which is, I mean, so beyond the pale now that one probably shouldn't even give it the oxygen of any attention at all. Suella vows to cut net migrant record of 504,000. We're not going to do the broader, bigger immigration conversation today. We did 2 hours on it yesterday. We'll return to it. Do you know what? Don't laugh, but I kind of miss the racists who used to ring in. Is there anything I can do to get you to ring in again, do you think? To sort of shout at me about, I don't know, what I can't even remember these days. Because look what you've done, guys. You did that thing in 2016 because you hated the foreigners, and now there's more of them coming here than ever before. And even worse, they're not Europeans, this lot. They're coming from Asia and Africa. It is actually incredible. 12 years of Tory rule defined largely by xenophobia, culminating in immigration figures that are the highest we've ever seen in this country. That's taking back control, guys. Well done. That's taking back control. That's global Britain. Well, actually, it kind of is global Britain, but in a good way. So what are you going to do as a politician? What are you going to do as a Tory politician? 12 years on the clock, your tank full of the fuel of jingoism and xenophobia, if we're being kind, base racism and bigotry, if we're not. What are you going to do? 12 years you've been in charge, the numbers have gone off the scale. If your base really cares about this, if you really care about this, Priti Patel and Suella Braverman essentially defined by their disdain for immigration in general and refugees in particular. Absolutely incredible when you think about it. I'm quite proud of the welcome that we've provided, despite little or no input from the government for Ukrainian refugees, albeit that it's a fraction per capita of what's happened everywhere from Ireland to Germany. And I think it was a matter of national duty to provide a haven for British Hong Kong residents, British Hong Kong citizens, who now fall increasingly under the aegis of the totalitarian Chinese regime. Ditto Afghanistan, although we've shouldered a fraction of our moral responsibilities because of the poisonous atmosphere surrounding immigration created by various conservative politicians, all competing to do their despicable little Nigel Farage tribute acts. And the same, of course, should be said of Syria and elsewhere. But we did that yesterday. I just find it almost hilarious now that it keeps going up and they keep claiming that they're the people to bring it down. And they keep competing with each other. Today, Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak get a front page each with their pledges to bring down these numbers. What I don't sense, and this is why I miss the calls off the racists in a way, because what I don't sense at the moment is much of it landing, actually. I know the small boats gets the Gammon and Pineapple Party very, very excited. But as, of course, Suella Braverman accidentally revealed on Wednesday, the reason why people have to come here in boats is because there are no safe routes for the massive majority of refugees. Whether that revelation is going to make much of a difference to the broader picture, I do not know. Next time Farage turns up in Dover with his Fisher-Price binoculars, rubbing his thighs at the sight of desperate human beings washing up on our shores, will it be easily translatable into racist hatred in the same way that his Breaking Point poster was? You remember that, the one he unveiled shortly before Joe Cox was assassinated by a white supremacist terrorist. I don't know whether the facts ever change the feelings of people like that, but I don't sense at the moment, even with the cost of living crisis kicking in, I don't sense that the flames of xenophobic fury are raging at the minute. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I don't sense it. I kind of always hold the view that racist rabble-rousing is only a few front pages away. Okay, I always think, however much optimism we can derive from opinion polling saying, you know, after Brexit, concern about immigration actually started plummeting because you weren't constantly being told to be angry about it. I think you can track the opinion polling on concern about immigration with the news coverage. I don't, it's dog and tail. What wags what? What wags what? It's a surprisingly hard phrase to say without doing your vocal warm-ups. What wags what? And yet, as the reporting is now increasing, I don't sense the flames of xenophobic fury are raging particularly. I could be wrong. It's got to be significant that the Daily Mail's going after doctors today, not immigrants or foreigners. Is it? I don't know. Maybe tomorrow the front page will be down with all foreigners and I'll have to eat a very small slither of humble pie. So, ministers explore plans for admissions to top institutions only in an attempt to cut immigration. Foreign students may be barred from Britain unless they win a place at a top university under Rishi Sunak's plans to curb record immigration. Can I confide in you briefly? I think, glancing at the clock, I shouldn't have done one of my round the houses introductions this morning. I'm thinking I shouldn't have gone off on a flight of fancy and a sort of world of whimsy. I should have gone straight in on a laser-like focused question because I don't know a lot about this issue and I don't think it is an immediately obvious provocation to you to call in and talk about. So now I'm worried. It's not so much, come on, James, don't let us down, that text that distracted me at the top of the show. Now I'm worried that I haven't given you any particular reason to call in. And it's time for a break, which I'm not supposed to call a break. I'm supposed to call it a junction. But here's the question. You know more about the world of immigration. I beg your pardon. You know more about the world of education than I do. I left university a long time ago. And I went to a university that was absolutely rammed with students from overseas. I think there were more students from overseas at my college when I was there than there were students not from overseas. Certainly by the time you got to the master's programs, they were running the place and marvellous. Some of them have gone on to run countries. But I don't know enough. I would cautiously suggest to you, and we may get Theo Usherwood to have a little look at this, I would cautiously suggest to you that if foreign students stop attending British universities will possibly go bust. So what is Rishi Sunak playing at? What is the Prime Minister playing at? If you know a bit about the world of academia, then either support or correct me on 0345 6060 973. 0345 6060 973. And if you can provide some insights into either the reality of the issue or the politics of it, then I will bite your arm off because I can't see this happening. I just think it is Rishi Sunak, somewhat surprisingly perhaps, adding himself to the very, very long list of British politicians, right-wing British politicians, promising to reduce the numbers of foreign people here without having any intention of doing so whatsoever. And yes, they pay huge sums of money, as far as I understand, into the British economy. So one of the ideas being considered is barring foreign students unless they have a place at an elite university. The ones that currently take the most foreign students include Manchester, Edinburgh, Leeds, Sheffield, University College London, King's College London and Imperial. So a crackdown on low-quality degrees has already been promised by Nadeem Zahawi when he was Education Secretary. But what would it actually be like on the ground? So what do we think of this story? 0345 6060 973. And what's going on politically? Why is Rishi Sunak letting it be known that he has foreign students in his sights? It just seems a little bit strange to me. Hit the numbers now. You really will get through. I'll tell you what. After an introduction like that, the door is wide open. You could stroll on with any old gubbins, frankly, on this morning's programme. So test that theory by dialing 0345 6060 973. It's 10:18. 21 minutes after 10, just a word of thanks to Louise this morning, who's just been in touch to say, James, I have oft been tempted. What a lovely turn of phrase you have, Louise. I have oft been tempted to phone Mystery Hour to find out how radio listening figures are arrived at. Then yesterday, I had a knock on the door. It was a lovely guy from Ipsos Mori asking me whether I would fill out a Radar radio survey. Never in the history of broadcasting has anyone been so excited. You and Nick Abbott can breathe a sigh of relief. You each have at least one listener. Thank you, Louise. You've made my morning. 22 minutes after 10 is the time. Foreign students face ban from universities. What does the story mean in the real world? And why is Rishi Sunak doing this in the political and increasingly delusional world of Tory party politics? Danielle is in Bournemouth to kick things off. Danielle, what can you tell us?
Hello, James. Happy to kick things off. So I've worked in international education. I worked in international education for about 20 years. I used to head up an international office at a university. So my job was to recruit international students. Yeah, absolutely. Fabulous job. Fabulous. Couple of points. Yes, they are a massive income stream, international students to a university. But more importantly, and your experience, I think, at LSE will prove this, I hope, that it's the impact on the British students and the UK students and that cultural mix and being able to work and study.
Yeah, but the Tories don't like that. Tories don't like that sort of thing, do they?
But especially now when there's less opportunity for British students to study abroad.
You're not going to vote for a racist, Danielle, if you spent 3 years hanging out with foreigners at college, are you?
Well, that's the problem. It's such a positive influence. The other thing I have a real bugbear with, because I've worked at what are called Russell Group universities, which I'm sure you know are considered the elite universities, and I've worked at non-Russell Group universities. And this notion of, the best universities is a complete joke.
Is it, though? Are you sure?
Yes, absolutely. And this horrible notion of low-quality degrees makes me so angry. Because some universities, like the university I worked at, which wasn't Russell Group,
right,
and you can see where I'm from, so you can put I'm not from here, but I live here. I can put two and two together. They have niche courses that are world-leading. Absolutely.
Yeah, but they're not talking about those courses, are they? They're talking about
What courses are they talking about?
Well, I presume that they're talking about courses that all universities do, and the ones that are easiest to get onto are because all the better quality candidates have gone to better quality universities to do the same course.
But that's not how it works. And not all universities do.
Slow down a bit. I can't keep up with you on this.
Producers always say to me, "Speak slowly."
Well, when are you going to start paying some attention to them, for goodness sake?
I should.
So but you're off again, honestly. Keith, get the fader.
Okay.
All right, watch it, Danielle. All right, you're on a warning.
I'm on it.
So I've always thought, and I am a bit of an idiot, I mean, in so many ways, but I used to be a particular idiot on this. I used to think, for example, that a media studies degree was akin to babby washing, a complete waste of time. Now I think that everybody should actually do compulsory media studies, and because that way you would know that most of the time they're lying to you. Here's the thing, though. If you've got 10 universities all offering an English literature course or a history course, and I know there's some snobbery attached to this, that's what I'm acknowledging in advance, and you've got a finite number of students applying, if you're in the bottom of that league table, no, it doesn't work. Course. Yeah, it doesn't work. Sorry, it fell apart before I'd even finished because I forgot about the foreign element. So you can close the course down by all means and say, look, there's no point doing this course. It's like being in the National League North of. Actually, that's bad as well because Kidderminster Harriers play in the National League North. This isn't going well. This isn't going well at all. But the point is this: why would a foreign student doing that course be problematic if the course still exists for British students?
Well, there is no reason why that would be problematic.
I know. I've just realised that while I was talking to you.
I also just need to say as well that for years we said to we were trying to campaign when it was actually Theresa May brought in all the new rules about immigration and visas and stuff for students years ago. Yeah. We said take the students out of the immigration statistics. They're not coming here to work. They're coming here to study, and most of them go back, even if they stay and work for a little bit afterwards.
Well, I don't know that the statistics support. I don't know if the statistics completely support you on that. I think there is an increase in people who stay. Not that you and I are particularly bothered by that. And indeed, there is also an increase, I think a tripling in the number of dependents that subsequently come here to join students, either past or present. And I guess that is perhaps part of the reasoning behind this idea, even though it doesn't stand up logically. Perhaps it does stand up politically. 2019, we launched an international, I'll say that again, 2019, so 3 years ago, we launched an international education strategy which set a target of 600,000 foreign students by 2030 to boost the value of Britain's education exports to £35 billion per year. The target was met in 2021, and celebrated by the government when Sunak was Chancellor. The figure is currently not that high, and they want it to become even lower. I don't understand. I think I do understand, but I don't understand how Rishi Sunak can lie straight in bed at night. So we go back a year. He's cheering to the rafters. The international education strategy, which set a target of 600,000 foreign students by 2030. And now he's saying we need fewer foreign students. Simon's in Bognor, from Bournemouth to Bognor. It's like a tour of British seaside towns. Simon, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Hello.
I'd just like to say I think it's a bit of nonsense. I think it's like a stock thing they trot out every now and then when they want to appear strong on immigration.
Does it work?
Well, I don't know. I'm in the industry, so and I've been in the industry for a long time, as in international education.
Yeah.
And it's not the first time they've done this. And what happens is there's a load of sort of saber rattling about it, so that it can appear strong on immigration. But it's just a what's it called? It's just a false flag. It's not real. The vast majority of international students, they come, they pay money, they study, they help to subsidise universities.
They pay a lot of money,
colleges.
don't
they? Yeah, they do. But also, there's a whole industry underneath in places like Bournemouth. There's like a whole industry of language schools, which are, they're preparing students to learn English so they can pass the exams they need to go to university. That then goes, they stay with host families. There's all sorts there. It's a massive, massive industry. And the government have never really understood it and all of the benefits that it brings.
Well, they must have done, because in 2019 they announced the international education programme to increase the numbers of foreign students here to 600,000 and the amount of money that they would bring into £35 billion. So they understood it 3 years ago. And when they achieved it in 2020, 2021, the bloke called Rishi Sunak, I don't know what happened to him, he was Chancellor of the Exchequer back then, and he was cheering it to the rafters for being a glorious success.
A politician changing their mind. I don't believe it changed.
I don't know. Whatever next. I think I might have solved this. I think I might know now what's going on. I'll tell you after the news. I'm not doing a hook and tease. I just want to check in my sort of own way that I'm not jumping before I've looked. What's that? Leaping before I've looked, or jumping the gun. Thank you, Simon. It's a load of old toot, isn't it, this? And that's quite worrying, isn't it? The relationship between government and politics. Government and media, rather, being what it is. You get on the blower to the Times newspaper, the paper of record in this country. You can get on the blower and really just serve up a load of old toot, and it ends up on the front page. What's the headline again? Foreign students face ban from universities, and I'll tell you why this is happening after Dominic Ellis brings you the latest headlines. 10:35 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and the question about why they're doing this. Well, I've got two thoughts, which is a record for me. The numbers are going to come down. The reason why immigration figures were so high last year is largely because of global events. The Ukrainian refugee exodus, the settlement scheme for British Hong Kong citizens. Most obviously, then there's a few thousand Afghans, which was a direct consequence of the fall of Kabul and the return of the Taliban. So these numbers are not likely to be repeated, which means if Suella Braverman can get a front page, even on the front page of a comic like the Daily Express, saying she's going to bring these numbers down, knowing full well that they're going to come down unless, Vladimir Putin invades another country, or another former British colony falls under the jackboot of China, which is unlikely in both cases, they're going to come down. This can't be sustained. European Union immigration is actually now a net minus, a net negative. Loads of people coming from India and Nigeria and elsewhere. A lot of them are students, but the big boosts to the migration figures, the war in Ukraine, and of course the loosening of the bottleneck caused by the COVID-19 crisis and the Hong Kong settlement scheme. So that's part of this. They both need to get something out there so that they can claim some sort of credit from potentially xenophobic voters who will potentially be worried by these sort of numbers. So the student element of it is Rishi Sunak's people overthinking it. So Braverman's gone in with a blunt instrument. Braverman's got on the phone to the Daily Express, and she has secured Suella vows to cut net migrant record of 504,000, which is a bit like me vowing to be hungry later today. It's going to happen, right? Sunak, his people have overthought it. He's brought that weird fellow who used to organise the sex parties back into number 10 Downing Street, Dougie Smith. They overthink stuff with their stupid culture war. So they're thinking, well, look, we can't say that we're opposed to Ukrainian refugees, can we? Because that's one of the things that we like to claim credit for, despite doing almost nothing to help. We can't claim that we're opposed to the Hong Kong settlement scheme, because that was very popular with Conservative MPs. We can't claim that we shouldn't have settled Afghans here, because we did barely anything, and we want to take a lap of honour for the pittance that we have. So they've overthought it, and they've broken down the numbers. And the only people they're left with, they can't even include the small boats, because those numbers are not included on this list. The only thing you're left with when you've got rid of the refugees and the Hong Kong Brits and the settled Afghans and the Syrians as well, there's a settlement scheme of sorts for Syrians. The only thing you're left with on this list, because you can't come to the UK, it's the blooming students. Everyone else has got a worker's visa. And we need workers. Oh, my days, poor old Rishi Sunak. So we can't go after the people with workers' visas because we've got massive shortages in just about every sector going as a direct consequence of Brexit, which you were in favour of. Well done. You can't go after the Ukrainian refugees because even though the government did next to nothing to help them, the public opinion is clearly, or was clearly, very much in the positive view. You can't go after settling Syrian refugees or Afghan refugees because the idea that, particularly in the case of Afghanistan, the idea that you don't provide refuge to people fleeing a war zone that you helped turn into a war zone is a little bit ridiculous. And you can't go after the British Hong Kong Chinese because that was incredibly popular with Conservative MPs in the first place. So who's left on the list? Look, we've got to make a promise today to bring down numbers. But if you actually dig into the list, all you're left with is foreign students. Which is why the front page of the Times today might as well have said, Rishi vows to cut foreign student numbers. In the way that the Daily Express says, Suella vows to cut net migrant numbers. Instead, the Times being a slightly more literate organ, they go for foreign students face ban from universities. Ministers explore plans for admissions to top institutions only to cut immigration. In attempt to cut immigration. And there it is, I've solved it for you. I need to take some more calls. I probably shouldn't have done that at 10:39. I should have waited until 10:59. So they both need to get front and centre today saying, we will bring these numbers down, even though they're going to come down anyway because there's not going to be an invasion of Ukraine or an exodus from Hong Kong next year. Suella Braverman has gone for the sledgehammer, the blunt instrument, the relatively sort of bovine rhetoric, and Rishi Sunak has tried to be clever and ended up going after the foreign students. Of course, I could be wrong. What would happen if we did actually massively reduce the number of foreign students coming into the UK? 0345 6060 973. And now, for one day only, you can either endorse or ridicule my analysis of the politics of this very strange story. Adam's in Seaham in County Durham. Adam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'm a senior lecturer in bioscience at the University of Sunderland.
Fantastic.
Which is a post-92 university, not
Right.
Russell Group.
Yeah.
But it's a former polytechnic that became a university in 1992. Now, on two counts, first of all this stuff about high-quality institutions is rubbish. Because there's a certain organisation that I'm sure you're aware of called the Quality Assurance Agency that goes around all universities, and every degree has external examiners which come in from other universities such as Oxford, Cambridge, Manchester, Nottingham, you name it. And they go to every other university. You invite them in, specialists in your field, and they check through your degree. They look at all the stuff that you're teaching. They look at all of your assessments. They look at all the marks you've given all the students. They look at the students' work.
Right.
And they determine whether or not it's all of an equal level to the institution at which they represent.
Okay.
And it gets accredited that way.
But there must be
every
organisations at the bottom of that list, as it were.
No, there is no list.
So it's either it's a pass or a fail, then, is it? Or
yeah, you
Okay.
you either are of equal quality to everybody else, or you're not, and you need to put your
fair enough.
ideas
So
up. Those comments come back through the external examiners, and you put things in place because then you have to go back to the Office of Students.
So you think this is meaningless then? This talk about low quality degrees you actually find meaningless?
It's meaningless in the real world,
Okay.
but it only means something to people who have people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who have this wonderful yesteryear, Oxford and Cambridge are the wonderful universities they are, because it's Russell Group. Because when it comes to research
before
funding,
you go on, I think I suffer from a slight case of this myself as well, which I'm admitting with a sense of shame and embarrassment.
Yeah, I mean, it's because they're Russell Group, they have a track record of research, and when you apply for research funding, you need a track record of research to get the funding. And because they're age-old institutions, well, they've got loads of track records. And when you get a new university coming in or somebody coming in with a new lab, it's incredibly difficult for them to set up research funding because all the funding councils have already allocated their monies mainly to Russell Group universities already.
Yes.
For the next 10, 20, 40 years. Now, so that's the one issue to the side. The other issue is what you mentioned about international students. And quite frankly, if that was the case, I know my university would fold if international students... Yeah,
it's an existential threat.
Completely and utterly. Home students will pay £9,500 a year tuition fees. International students will pay £18,500 tuition fees. Now, when you look at the different types of degrees any given university will have on their records, you generally have arts degrees, which for the most part are not resource intensive. You need a lecturer, you need a room, a few books, whatever it may be. I'm being very generalist here.
Yeah, of course.
But it's not very resource intensive. But then you go to the sciences, and you're looking at highly resource-intensive degrees, ones that require very expensive machines, very expensive equipment, consumables that you go through like you wouldn't believe.
Of course.
Chemicals, biocosh, risk assessments, and all these different types of things. It's very, very costly to do any kind of science degree when compared to an arts degree.
Yes, of course it is.
Most of our foreign students do the science degrees.
Right.
And in our university, we're very well known for our School of Pharmacy. We're very well known for our nursing, our new medical school. We teach biomedical sciences, one of the top institutions for biomedical sciences. We teach clinical physiology. We do midwifery. We do paramedic science. And if we stopped international students coming in, you can basically close down our science department. You can also close down most of the other departments because we have a large cohort, a very large cohort of international students. With that in mind as well, the university is the single largest employer in the area.
Is it really?
And so
right, pause there, because you've given me chapter and verse on why this would be a really stupid thing to do. Presuming that we haven't both misunderstood the rationale behind these headlines and proposals and suggestions, why has Rishi Sunak called in a favour to get the front page of the Times today dedicated to his plan to cut the number of foreign students coming to the UK?
I couldn't tell you. My only guess is he trying to bury some other bad news somewhere else?
You're a cynical old soul for a scientist, Adam, honestly. I don't deal in the grey area. I deal in the grey areas of the nuance, the suspicion. Whatever you are left with, however unlikely.
No matter how improbable.
Must be the truth. And it would have been nice, of course, to see a little bit more about PPE contracts and possibly Michelle Mone on front pages today. But to be fair, it is only The Guardian who broke that story yesterday, who pick up on the fact that MPs are now urging an investigation into contracts in general. There are already investigations underway into Michelle Mone's reported profits in particular. Thank you, Adam. The time is 10:45. OK, Theo Usherwood's here, but I've got Pablo in Camberwell, Stephanie in Vienna, Andrew in Acton, Anna in Oxford, Michelle in Rotherham. I've got lots of people waiting to talk to me. Who's going to take priority?
Do you want me to rattle through it where I do that thing where I speak really quickly?
No,
or do you want to
not.
or do you want me to put me back a bit?
Well, I don't even know why you're here.
Well, I was here to talk about student visas.
OK.
Because the government is going to have a crackdown on
Is
student
it though?
visas.
Do we believe that it is, even?
Well, that's what we are told they are
It
going
is.
to do.
And who have you been speaking to about this?
I've been speaking to somebody called Professor Steve West, and he is the president of Universities UK, which represents most universities in this country, and he is also the Vice-Chancellor of University of West of England. And he's been making the point to me...
Carry on.
that, of course, international students can pay fees of upwards £30,000 a year to study here in the UK. They also, of course, spend monies in bars and restaurants in the towns and support the local economies where their universities are. And that if they are prevented from coming to this country, it could have a devastating impact on what is one of our most successful export industries.
We're talking in terms of tens of billions of pounds to the UK economy here when we look across the United Kingdom. I don't think we can afford to turn our backs on what is a very successful, incredibly successful export industry.
The danger of turning our backs on it, what could that mean in real terms?
It would mean that for many, many universities, their ability to continue to undertake the research that we undertake and the span of education that we provide, and of course our civic outreach and all of the things that universities are expected to do, will be squeezed, and that will mean difficult choices. And for some institutions, my fear is that they will not be able to balance their books, and they will then potentially have to close. And that will be a complete disaster across the country in towns and cities that really rely on universities as anchor institutions, civically engaged and creating a magnet to get inward investment. Businesses are attracted to where their universities are.
On that point, I guess when you have universities in towns, there's an economy, right?
All you have to do is to see what happens over the summer periods. I mean, I'm based in Bristol, and Bristol industry sectors, businesses, retail, coffee shops rely on that student economy. And over the summer, it's pretty quiet, and they feel it. They feel it.
Now, of course, James, the government did have a target to have 600,000 international students to arrive in the UK by 2030 in the hope that it would boost the education sector by £35 billion a year. And somebody who celebrated that, who, when we met the target early in 2019, was none other than the Chancellor at the time, Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
But now...
Just for anyone who thinks they've accidentally stumbled on a radio equivalent of Groundhog Day, you're not imagining things. See, I did just share with you something that I shared with you 20 minutes ago.
Oh, sorry. I was paying attention.
It's a busy world. The world is turning fast.
To deliver you something,
I know,
James,
but you just said it in portentous tones, as if you were dropping scoops all over the studio.
No, wasn't. No,
you did, because you've got a very authoritative way with yourself. I didn't mean to. I like your authoritative ways.
Just trying to...
What's going on then, Theo? Well, you can't really speculate, can you? But I mean, it's a stupid idea, which is essentially a slightly watered-down version of the front page that Suella Braverman managed to secure in the Daily Express, which is Suella vows to cut net migrant record of 504,000. And Rishi Sunak gets a sort of watered-down university-specific one, which is foreign students face ban from universities. But gravity dictates that 504,000 net migration is going to come down anyway, because Ukraine can't be invaded twice and Hong Kong citizens can't be offered safe sanctuary here as they leave Hong Kong twice.
Yes, so they need to find something, but they still need to find something else to say. And of course, actually, if you look at the number of non-EU migrant workers coming to the UK, it has fallen significantly. It's only just over 100,000.
When is Theo getting his own podcast? Has just come in via text.
You have to listen between 10 and 1 every single weekday, and then you can hear us speak.
No, but when are you getting your own podcast? They want to know. Well, I say it's just one random text.
I don't know.
Would you want a podcast?
I think so.
Do you know what you should do for podcasts?
What's that?
You should get questions from my listeners about political issues, and then you should dig into them with relevant experts.
Okay.
So, would be things like almost mystery.
Do I get interrupted if I have a podcast?
I don't know that I'm going to do it with you.
No.
Let's not get carried away. I've got podcasts coming out my ears.
This is my point, James.
What?
I don't need to be on your coattails.
You're quite right, too. We're trying to launch brand Theo now.
But I could have a podcast where I'm not interrupted.
Oh, gosh.
Or patronised.
What?
Or condescended to.
What are you talking about? What are these verbs?
I get to speak.
Hurry up, Theo. So should we look into this? Do you want me to have a word?
We can have a look into it.
It's good, It's a nice little sideline. It's a side hustle, the old podcast.
Okay.
Well, so I talked to Steve Allen about it. Keeping him in chocolates. Diabetic chocolates, I stress. Are we going to see you again today?
news never stops.
News waits for no man, not even Theo Ushwood, LBC's inimitable political editor. And we'll look into that idea. I like that. Theo Explains or Theo's Quest or something like that, where you get a political... Obviously, this idea would be a lot better if I could now think of some things that you could answer about why don't we have a written constitution, for example.
We don't. We have a codified constitution now.
Yeah, what's all that? You've got to get a podcast out of this.
Right, okay. I'll find it.
So there's an idea. What else? Shall I get some questions to come in? Do people want to come in? I mean,
I can't answer them immediately. I've got to go away.
No, well, that's the whole point of a podcast, is that you can spend more time. Quite a lot of people want to know whether or not you could do a podcast that allows Theo to speak without your constant interruptions. We really want to hear him.
That's a good idea.
That is a good idea. I will subscribe to Theo Ushwood's podcast, says Andrew, any day. He's a great political analyst. And Stephen even uses capital letters. Yes, Theo needs his own show or podcast.
Right, there we go. Let's make it happen.
Please stop talking over Theo. I want to hear what he has to say, not you. James, please let Theo speak without constant interruptions. We want to hear him.
Is that right?
There's a coup underway. Please stop talking over each other. Thanks, John. James, leave Theo alone. It's a bit strong.
The checks are all in the post, by the way.
I'm getting you a podcast, man. Seriously, my work here is done. Take care. See you in a bit. Pablo is in Camberwell. Pablo, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning.
Hello.
I was listening to the conversation about students, and
yes,
and it was like the straw that broke the camel's back for me, because I've been watching political developments in Britain for decades now, and I've been traveling abroad. I come from South America, and you can actually see the patterns that are happening in this country that also happen in other countries in South America, which is that the country is progressing, the country is changing slowly, but getting better every year, every decade.
Gosh, that must be nice.
But some people, politicians, they don't like it. They have a circle, an influential circle, and they want to talk to that circle, and they start saying things that resonate with the public, and they start blaming everybody else about the downturn of the economy, or that Britain is not as influential in the Western world as it used to be. And these things resonate in people and create results. And we've seen it in Britain for some time now.
I don't think the Tories were ever very comfortable with people from lower classes going to universities in the first place, to be honest with you.
Well, absolutely true. Absolutely true. I mean, I saw that development over the last 20 years. I have two sons. They're 30 years now. They both went to university, and I thought that was a fantastic. I work in the film business. So many young people that were coming into the film business from different parts of the country had gone to university that had created a much better environment. They was more knowledgeable. So things were getting better. But suddenly, when there's a downturn of the economy, like what happened in 2007 and 2008, it gives a footing for some politicians and some people in society, and especially the media, to start creating a narrative that doesn't exist. But I've seen this happening before when there is when a certain group, a wealthy group, or the best side of society start losing a little bit of wealth, start losing a little bit of power because they have to share it. They come up with all sorts of things and blame, and start blaming other people for their own misfortune.
I'm familiar with that. I think it's as old as humanity itself, that notion of othering and blame. But foreign students seem an unlikely receptacle for this bile, don't they? Normally it's a little bit more.
It's now foreign students, but say 10 years ago, they were our own students when they were being blamed that they were not worthy of being in university, so they had to pay. They had to pay for university.
Gosh, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, sadly, my two sons managed to just scrape through when university fees were only a third of what they are now.
Yeah, same.
And so I think this is what's going on. They're always looking for new people to blame for their own misfortune.
And we could go a little further and say that if the Conservatives aren't turning out people that are more likely to be Conservatives, then Conservatives can't really see the point of universities at all. Too many plebs going, too many foreigners, and also, of course, a degree is increasingly But there is increasing evidence that having a degree makes you considerably less likely to vote for right-wing politicians, whether it's Donald Trump in America or the Tory party back in the UK. Thank you, Pablo. I presume the same holds true in South America. We're going to go off on a bit of a tangent next. We haven't done this for a very, very long time. The last time we did it, it all went a bit wrong. And also, I'm now going to go Pete Partridge, because I do really like wind turbines. I like them both in principle, because it's renewable energy, and I like them in practice, because I think they look amazing. I'm lucky to spend quite a lot of time in Norfolk, where there are quite a lot of wind turbines. There used to be one near Swaffham that you could even go up, but you can't anymore, so don't get too excited. They're also becoming a political football, which we will have a little dribble with after this. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. So, you know that we sometimes describe subjects as the ones that are trickiest in some ways for our purposes when we spend our mornings together. The ones about which you know nothing until the point at which you suddenly need to know something. Everything even. You know nothing until you need to know everything. It first occurred to me, that phrase, when we started talking about the situation in care homes. And the idea that you know nothing about care homes until you need to put someone in one, until you need to find one for your mum or your granddad. You know nothing about care homes, because even when we cover it on the radio or you read it in the papers, you turn the page, really, don't you? You know when you hear your hometown in a news bulletin, if you're not from London, if you're from London, you're spoilt. But if you're from somewhere like Kidderminster, like me, and you hear it in the news. Did you see the story this week about the bloke who caught an enormous goldfish? Did you see that story, Keith? Did you see the size of that guy? It's called the Carrot. It's in a French lake somewhere, and it's the biggest goldfish ever. Did everyone see that story? It was an amazing story. Guess where the bloke who caught it was from? Go on, guess. It's not rhetorical. Kidderminster. Oh, yeah. Didn't get mentioned in some of the coverage, but we know. Taps knows. We know. And you hear your hometown being mentioned in the news, and you suddenly pay a lot more attention to the story than you would if it hadn't mentioned your hometown. That's kind of a part of the same process about you need to know everything about. You know nothing about something until you know everything about it. So if you don't need to know anything about it, you turn the page. I don't care about a massive goldfish being caught in a pond in France until I notice that the bloke's from Kidderminster, and then I go, oh wow, that's good, isn't it? But with care homes, unless you're looking to put a loved one in one, you just turn the page. Oh, yeah, whatever. It sounds bad, but it doesn't affect me. I think wind turbines might be a bit like that, actually, because I think I like them, right? I think that they are obviously necessary. And you've got epic problems environmentally with fossil fuels, but also, of course, economically with the cost of them. So the idea that you should stick wind turbines wherever there's a spare bit of land seems pretty obvious to me. Now, don't bore me with the entry-level science on this. I know that a big problem is storage. I know storage is a huge problem, and wind turbines don't offer up maximum efficiency just yet, because for the very obvious reason that if there's no wind, they're not going to be producing any electricity. But here's my counter to that, before you waste tenpence ringing in. My counter to that is this. The more you invest in technology, the better it gets. Right? You don't need to be Elon Musk to understand this. The more money you spend on technology, as in equipment, the better it gets. And the more you build, the quicker that process occurs. If you like, a technological evolution, the speed of a technological evolution is going to be dictated by the amount going into the technological revolution. Not always. It's not a hard and fast rule. But if you look at everything from the Industrial Revolution onwards, the more investment, that's why we led it internationally, the more investment you have in everything from research and development right through to implementation, then the faster the improvements will occur. Okay? Adam's been in touch to say it wasn't a goldfish, it was a carp-koi hybrid, and in no way a goldfish. I have no idea why it was reported that way. Well, I do, Adam. It was a fish, mate, and it was gold. Right? I'm happy to clear that up for you. Hopefully I'll be similarly insightful on the subject of wind turbines. So I think we should be building loads for what strike me as blindingly obvious reasons. So where is the problem? Okay, well, who's opposed to it? I see. Say similar people perhaps to the ones that voted or indeed defeated Rishi Sunak before it even came to a vote on this, on the plan to build 300,000 new houses every year. David Cameron said in 2014 that the public were fed up of the turbines and promised not to subsidise them if the Conservatives won the upcoming general election. That ban has been in place. But Boris Johnson, of course, was also in support of this ban while he was Prime Minister, which makes it, perhaps, if we were talking about anyone except Boris Johnson, somewhat surprising that he's now signed an amendment to the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which is designed to overturn the ban. Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. Another story actually emerged yesterday that Liz Truss was talking to Boris Johnson about perhaps returning to the Foreign Office as Foreign Secretary if her premiership had lasted more than 13 minutes. So Boris Johnson and Liz Truss last night launched a challenge to Rishi Sunak's authority by joining a Tory rebellion backing wind farms to tackle the energy crisis. So no prizes for predicting that Boris Johnson can simultaneously run in two directions at the same time. The politics of this are interesting because it's NIMBYism, I presume, until you tell me differently. 03456060973 is the number you need. Why would anyone be opposed to this? Answer: people think that they're a blight on the landscape. You wouldn't want one spoiling the view that you've got from your country home. And I mean country home, not country house. I'm not going to get classist about this, even though David Cameron's mates are more likely to live in stately homes than council homes. The idea of a wind farm spoiling an area of natural beauty clearly has some salience. But come on. Look at the world. Look at the reliance on fossil fuels. Look at what it can do to a country like this, which is nowhere near as dependent, for example, on gas coming out of Russia as many of our European friends and allies. That I've never really understood from studying hydroelectric power at prep school, when we used to draw beautiful diagrams of a big reservoir of water at the top of a hill, making its way to the bottom of a hill and spinning a wheel on its way that would generate epic amounts of electricity. I've never understood why we haven't, as a society, as a civilization, as a world, gone all in on renewable energy from the very first opportunity. Of course, I do understand it's because of the amount of money that people make out of fossil fuels. And they are the ones that fund the so-called think tanks that lobby in favour of everything from cigarette smoking to petrol usage. But now, looking at the world, looking at what we've learned in recent years, how can anybody be opposed to wind farms? So what's the problem? What's the story? Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, why is there a Conservative resistance to wind farms? Is it just NIMBYism? Is it literally they're more likely to be in the national parks or areas of great national beauty, natural beauty even? I don't know. Talk to me about the debate and talk to me about the actual technology, the actual phenomenon. How could you not be in favour of wind farms, knowing what we know about the world in which we live? 03456060973 is the number you need. This is from Jodie. She says, we have wind farms off our Thanet coastline in the sea. Lots of people dislike them, as they say they blight the landscape and our watery horizon. But I think they look beautiful and I'm completely mesmerised by them. So am I, actually. But we're talking about onshore now rather than offshore. I think offshore is probably less controversial, but I also find them spectacular. Why, I wonder, is it the aesthetics promote such debate? Jodie adds, I'm also from Kidderminster. How about that, eh? Did you see the story about the goldfish? 2 words, Jodie. We don't want to upset the pescatarian community. Also, I'm from Kidderminster, but now live in Thanet. Lots of family still in Kiddie on the Birch and Coppice estate. I know it well. We used to live up in Haberley. 12 minutes after 11 is the time. Let's do wind turbines. All right, that's it. Phone number 03456060973. Crucial question. Why would anybody be opposed to them at this point in human history? Okay, 03456060973. And second question, I haven't dug deep into this story, so why is it a politically divisive issue for the Conservative Party? Talk to me about that, because I presume, and I'm not going to attack you for being a NIMBY. I happen to like wind turbines, but I don't know that I'd necessarily want one in my back garden. And if I lived somewhere where I had a glorious view of the South Downs, or I had a glorious view of Lake Windermere, or I had a glorious view of Ben Nevis, or I had a glorious view of the big mountain in Wales that got renamed recently, then I would not necessarily be as relaxed about saying just stick them up everywhere, stick them up anywhere. All right, but we should be doing that in the interest of civilization and society, and energy bills and the environment. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call if you want to join in. James, driving through Cornwall, my kids are always in awe when they see the onshore wind farms, and I'm the same in Norfolk. They're not massive, but you know, knocking around near Fakenham, there's about half a dozen on the horizon there, and I don't understand the objection, unless you object to anything. I mean, what about a beautiful viaduct? You see an amazing viaduct as you're coming into Manchester near Stockport, and you see that incredible viaduct. I just find, this is when I go partridgey. Crikey, Paul's gone poetic. I'm about to go partridge. He's gone poetic. He says they look like hope. I completely agree with you. I see bridges, viaducts, aqueducts, even more than viaducts. Evidence of man's dominion over nature. We will harness Mother Nature to our own ends. And when Mother Nature throws obstacles in our way, we will build our way through them, or over them, or round them. I know I'm sounding a little bit strange. I genuinely mean this. Listen, I couldn't engineer my way out of a wet paper bag, but I'm in awe of Isambard Kingdom Brunel. I find the idea of looking at the world and thinking that you will use your brain to solve physical problems, in this case, planetary problems, in this case, you know, environmental problems. You will use your brain to solve these problems pretty much. And as you know, all of my background is in arts and literature. I haven't got a rubbish at science, to my shame, all my life. I'm in awe of science. It took me a while to get to this place. But engineering and science are really the things that allow humans to have the time and the space to read books and make music and learn how to conga. That is what humanity has achieved. And I see wind farms, perhaps wrongly, but I don't think so. I see wind turbines as part of that incredible process of humanity harnessing nature to its own advantage. I think I went a bit poetic there at the end. Thank you, Paul, for the inspiration. 19 minutes after 11 is the time. I mean, give me the history as well. Is it really naive and simplistic to say that the reason why we haven't got much, much better renewable energy is simply because of the amount of money people make out of fossil fuels? If I had a product that had made me a billionaire and you came along and said, oh, I've got this idea, right? Isn't there a famous story about this? It's probably apocryphal. But I come along and say, oh, I've got this thing. It can do the same job for free. I mean, all we've got to do is build something and then it will just produce energy for free. And you'll be like, well, that's not a very good idea at all. I'm currently making £1 billion a week. Oh, £1 billion a week. I'm currently making billions. Do you see what I mean? How much effort would you go to shut me down? And would you, for example, donate to a secretly funded think tank that inexplicably gets invited onto television and radio programmes to put forward points of view that serve the interests of precisely nobody but whoever is anonymously paying your wages? Would you do that, do you think? I mean, what if I was tobacco? Well, someone comes along and says tobacco is very, very bad for you. We should probably not sell it. Did you pay someone to pretend that they were libertarian when in fact all they wanted to do was massively increase the likelihood of you and your children getting cancer? Because they're out there. Anyway, back to wind turbines. Guy's in Epsom. Guy, what would you like to say?
I'll give you some background, really, and some facts and figures.
Yes.
It's essentially a fallacy that the public are against wind turbines.
Yeah.
The research tells us that you have two types of turbine. You have onshore and you have offshore.
Yes.
And research tells us that the onshore turbines, about 70% of the public approve of them. And, of course, because you can't see the offshore turbines now, the approval rating for offshore is much higher, or is somewhat higher.
Sure.
So it's a very small group or cohort that object to these things. The problem is, when you plan a wind farm, it can take kind of 8 years to go from initial planning stages to generating power. Yeah. And there are multiple points along that 8 years where you can intervene and put up objections and get it overturned. The problem is that it takes so long. In actual fact, an offshore turbine, you can install and have it generating in 12 hours. and one turn of the rotors is enough to basically fuel your Tesla or whatever for a full tank for like 250 miles. And they're turning roughly every 10 seconds.
Yeah.
They are inherently deflationary, and fossil fuels are inherently inflationary. So the more you dig out of the ground to burn, the more expensive it becomes. This is where the problem is. Once all the expenditure on a wind turbine is at the front end.
Yes, of
so
course.
When you build it, after that it's all
I'm
free.
not completely stupid. I understand that bit of it. I think I just said that actually just before you came on. So I presume the opposition politically is almost constituency specific. So it's like a re-election issue for Conservative MPs in constituencies where there's a significant local opposition to a wind farm because it's going to spoil the view.
Well, this is another problem. You don't know where the objection comes from. No. Anyone can object to it. So you don't have to live in the constituency for an onshore, where an onshore development is being made to object to it.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
So we could be getting quite sinister here then. You could be getting vested interests objecting to wind farms in places they've never even visited because they will take eventually a huge bite out of profits of companies currently providing unhealthy energy.
And we would never know.
We would never know. Well, why do you know so much about it? Are you in the biz?
I am. I do work in the industry.
That's good. That's fine. That's why you know. Why would David Cameron then, do you think, in 2014 have said that he was fed up of these turbines and promised not to subsidise them if the Conservatives win the upcoming general election?
Well, who can say? You
can speculate. You're not Theo Usherwood. You're allowed to have an opinion, for heaven's sake.
I would never talk badly of Theo. Every politician has advisors who have specific interests.
That's true. And lobbyists as well, of course. Who have very specific interests, yes.
And that's not to say that the wind industry doesn't also lobby. It does. But, I always think it's telling what happens and where people go after they kind of finish in office. If you look at it, I often thought about doing a study of where politicians get their directorships after they leave and what they do.
It's a very good point.
The fossil fuel industry is incredibly well capitalised. In actual fact, at the moment, the wind industry cannot make a profit. They're writing down hundreds of millions of euros and dollars and pounds in debt every year, and that's across the board. That's quite at odds with what the eye-watering amounts of money that fossil fuel companies are making.
It is simply David.
Be more stark.
David and Goliath. Can I ask you one question that maybe will make me sound quite stupid? Why don't? I mean, given that the fossil fuel companies are so well capitalised, there is so much money swilling around. Why don't they move into the renewables? Why don't they move into wind turbines like a boss?
They are. They are getting involved, particularly on the continent. They are getting involved with huge developments.
But the more pressure is put upon fossil fuel supply, the more pressure is put upon them to move. So, in fact, your Extinction Rebellions and your Just Stop Oils arguably could prompt some of the best capitalised companies on the planet that are currently churning poison out at a rate of knots, could actually prompt them to start looking for much, much healthier methods of producing energy.
Well, they essentially don't have any choice. There is only one game in town. There's a finite amount of oil and gas and what have you in the ground. But what the most interesting development is not actually storage. Storage is problematic, as you said at the top of the show. Actually, what is really interesting is what the offshore turbines and the onshore turbines are being adapted for is to create hydrogen from wind power. So you basically electrolyze water, seawater, and you can pump hydrogen, which when you burn it, all it gives off is water. So the battery storage thing is a bit of a misnomer. I think it will come and go. It won't last.
Well, the technology will improve apace, won't it? Well, do you know why, Don? Sorry, I'm monopolising your I've got lots of people waiting, but I've got one more question because you're in the business. I don't know if anyone else ringing in will be. What was Donald Trump? Donald Trump went a bit weird. I know he went weird about everything, but he had a particular problem with wind turbines. Was that because of his golf courses?
I don't. I
can't ask people to come on the
space.
radio and start asking them to unpick the machinations of what passes for Donald Trump's brain. My apologies. That was an appalling intervention on my... Thank you, Guy. You open up lots of avenues of interest, although the absurdities remain in my inbox. I've upset the fishing community now, apparently. James, please stop offending the fishing community by reporting the capture of a koi hybrid as a goldfish when clearly it's actually orange rather than gold. That's why I thought of Donald Trump a minute ago, because I was just reading that while Guy was talking. Many thanks. Yeah, but all goldfish are orange, aren't they? All the fish we call goldfish are orange. So you can't say that I shouldn't have called that fish a goldfish because it's not gold. You can say I shouldn't have called it a goldfish because it's not a goldfish, but then I am perfectly entitled to call it a gold fish. I'm just not entitled to call it a goldfish. Because if you can't call a goldfish because it's not gold, it's orange, then you can't call any goldfish because they're not gold, they're orange. Richard's in Norwich. Richard, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James.
Hello, mate.
First-time caller, so slightly nervous.
Welcome aboard. It's only me.
I just sort of looking at the objections viewpoint, really. I used to live in a little village called Caister in Norfolk, which I don't know if you're familiar with from your time in this part of the world. And about 20 years ago, they put a wind farm about 2 miles offshore. So whilst it is technically an offshore wind farm, it's really visible from the beach.
Yes. Not every day.
Not every day. On a very, very foggy day, you can't see it, but you can hear it because the foghorns start going. But from my very scientific survey of spending a lot of time on the beach in Caister, I'd say the vast majority of people are quite in favour of them. We all know that the future is, moving away from fossil fuels and stuff like that. And the one at Caister was very experimental. And I'd say that 95% of the people that came to the beach thought it was a good thing, and they were actually nice to look at. So I think personally the objections are cynical political ploys from the people.
And isn't it interesting? I mean, it's so interesting, this, isn't it? Because, and Guy touched on this as well, there is a sense that there is deep public opposition to it. And I'm thinking, as I read the article today, I'm thinking, oh, yes, it must be local objections in constituencies that prompt Tory MPs, understandably, to think that they have their re-election chances damaged by unpopular developments in their... But these MPs could be the ones that are getting, donations from fossil fuel companies.
Gut feeling. Yeah, that is my gut feeling, because I say it's a very, very unscientific sort of... on the beach.
I mean, you're on the right show. I'm just trying to place Caister, right? There's a Roman fort there, isn't there? Is it?
That's right, yeah.
Is it the one? What's the one just near Yarmouth where there's that weird sort of stretch where it looks like people have built their own homes? Is that Caister?
Yes. The bit near there's a bit just outside of Yarmouth, sort of some allotments and stuff like that.
No, it's not that. There's that one long stretch where every building is different. I don't think you're allowed to live there all year round. And it looks like some of them look like Art Deco masterpieces, and some of them look like glorified garden sheds. That's not Caister, is it?
No, I don't think so. No. Oh, Caister's all terribly well brick built.
It is, isn't it? Yes. No riff-raff in Caister. I'm surprised they let you in, Richard.
Well, they kicked me out. I don't live there anymore.
11:05 is the time. Dominic Ellis is here now with your headlines. 11:35 is the time. All right. Welcome to my world. We should probably be talking about that ULEZ thing, but I really want to talk about Matt Hancock in the next hour, because I've got a horrible feeling, looking at some of the newspaper coverage, that he has been successful in his attempts to rehabilitate his image, which actually makes me feel a bit sick. And I didn't even lose a loved one during the pandemic. The problem with the ULEZ conversation is I can tell you exactly how it goes. I take a call from someone who is worried that their business isn't going to be able to survive the upgrade in vehicle costs, and then we get a little bit confused about what sort of compensation is in place to help people who have to replace their diesel vehicles in order to keep in with the new rules. Then I make a couple of only slightly half-hearted comments about how I now won't be able to drive my own car out of my own street because it's diesel and it's just outside the zone, but it will now be in the zone. So I mean, poor me. I don't expect anyone to get their violins out on my part. And then, quite rightly, someone else will point out that that the species is facing existential threat on this planet, and anything we can do to improve or reduce the use of fossil fuels has got to be a plus. And then, of course, most importantly of all for me, the air quality in this country. We've already had one little girl's coroner's report stating that pollution had contributed to her death. And I see that as and I think the mayor does as well, I see that as the trump card, the conversation closing card is the one that says, we've got to improve the quality of the air that we breathe. The problem with that is it doesn't really get picked up by the UK media. You've got to actually dig into United Nations research and reports to find out what sort of progress London has made over the last few years in literally improving the quality of the air that we all breathe. So I don't know that I'm that keen on talking about it. And also, it's Friday, and I've worked very hard this week. I've done several appointments outside of the radio programme. Some days I've worked at 5 hours. So I think I quite like to have a slightly more light-hearted conversation about Matt Hancock, but obviously with a very serious side order of sickness about the fact that the man seems, I hope I'm wrong, but we'll find out. 11:37. Martine says, how many birds do wind farms kill every year? I don't know if that's a joke, Martine. I can't imagine what the punchline is, but do I look like Google? Paul's in Totnes. Paul, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello,
we
Paul.
met years ago when you crashed into the back of me and you put me on the radio because I was so nice to you.
This is embarrassing. I've got no memory whatsoever. When did I've never crashed into the back of any... What do you mean physically? I wasn't in a car.
You were in a car.
I've never crashed into anybody.
BMW sports car, a two-door BMW,
No.
about 18 years ago.
No, I've never driven a two-door BMW sports car.
Well, I was on your show.
You're getting me mixed up with someone else, Paul.
How bizarre! It must have been one of the other presenters.
This is not a surreal conversation at all. Did you clear this with the producer before you came on?
I did mention it to the producer. Yeah.
Are you about to hit me with a whiplash claim?
No, not at all. I was.
No, it wasn't me. Seriously.
I was on the Ian Lee show a lot. I was Paul from the Ladbroke Grove.
I remember that. No, but you never got on with me.
Oh, how strange.
Well, you may have got on with me, but I've never driven a BMW, let alone into the back of you.
I thought it was a little Z3.
I don't even know what that means. I've driven 3 cars in my life.
Really?
Yeah. I've driven a VW Polo, a Vauxhall Mariva, and a Volvo Estate. They're the only cars I've ever driven. I've never driven a friend's car. Oh, I tell a lie. Vauxhall once gave me a Vauxhall Zafira to try out because I was waxing lyrical about them on the radio. I drove it once, parked it outside my house. It got stolen. I had to phone up the press office at Vauxhall and say, you know that car you delivered this morning for me to borrow for 6 months, very generously, because I'm a minor celebrity? And they said, yes, how are you getting on with it? I said, well, it's a very nice car. Unfortunately, it's just been stolen. They nicked the keys from inside the front door while Mrs. O.B. was bringing the shopping in.
Oh, dear.
Thanks for bringing that back, Paul.
Oh, that's all right.
I've definitely never driven a BMW, let alone into the back of Paul in Ladbroke Grove. I lived near Ladbroke Grove once. Who did he give you my details? Did someone say they were called James O'Brien?
Yeah, it must have been one of the other presenters on LBC.
I could have played havoc with my insurance.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't me. It might have been Nick Ferrari, but I don't think anyone's ever mistaken me for Nick Ferrari in a physical sense.
Oh,
or a political one. Anyway, carry on.
These wind turbines.
Unfortunately now, I'm not sure I can trust the words you say about wind turbines. But let's see how we get on.
You often see them by the side of motorways.
You do.
Of mainland Europe.
You do, yes. That's why you keep having crashes. You're too busy looking at the wind turbines.
Yeah, exactly. But I think surely that's the place to put them because you'll get turbulence from the passing at some traffic that helps turn them. And also, you don't really want to grow vegetables by the side of the road, do you?
Yeah, you do. They're not. The vegetables need carbon dioxide to do photosynthesis.
Yeah, they do, but you get a lot of nasty particles.
It might be really good arable
fuel.
land. Yeah, I mean, is that it? Is that your contribution? Is that we've been round the houses with my motoring history so that you could say, let's build more wind turbines near motorways?
Yeah, and by the sides of roads, simply because they're not pretty places.
No, I mean, fine. I'm not complaining. Well, I'm sort of complaining. I was just clarifying that was the beginning, the middle, and the end of your suggestion.
Oh, and the other thing is the storage of power.
Yes.
Why don't they pump water up to the top of a dam and then release it to turn the turbines when they need it?
But use the energy from the wind turbines that is not needed because they're in excess.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, this is a good thing. You're thinking out loud. You're like an Isambard Kingdom Brunel with a bad memory. That is the kind of thing that would happen if we were investing a lot more time and energy in these sort of technologies. I believe. Paul, drive carefully. 11:42 is the time. That's about the level of my renown, isn't it? Is that sort of complete strangers can wander around the country claiming to be me whenever they have a car accident. Sheesh. You've never done that, have you, Keith? Is that no? You did that when you were fare dodging that time, didn't you? And I got that letter through from British Transport Police. John's in Reading. John, what would you like to say?
1 second, I'm still laughing.
That was a bit odd, that, wasn't it? Because then I thought, I go through phases. The first one is, oh, Lord, I can't remember that. How embarrassing. My brain's shot to... Anyway, it wasn't me.
Let me get on topic.
Yes.
Right. Oh, 1 second. Right. Right, I'm trying to get back on topic.
Take your time, John. Wind turbines.
No, indeed. Yeah. James, if I said to you, why don't we remove the nuclear deterrent from this country? The first thing in your mind would say, that's a bit stupid. Why don't we look at energy as the same concept? Why isn't it not a national security issue? We have Russia basically removing gas and energy. Obviously, we do produce a lot of gas and energy, but a lot of energy coming into this country. We have Conservative MPs go on the radio saying, we can't basically build all these wind turbines. And you're saying, well, I could throw it back to you and say, well, why do we have nuclear deterrents then? Why do we have nuclear reactors down the road? We obviously look at Japan and basically the issues we have with Japan. Why don't we look at the oil and gas? And I say, well, mate, let me be frank with you. Nuclear weapon, energy coming in this country, keeping the lights on, keeping the country running. You're a muppet. And then the second point, James, is you have these people in the country who work basically around saying, they're complaining about wind turbines. These are the same muppets also who don't have a problem with Chinooks flying over their house every half an hour, saying, look at these wonderful Chinooks flying over. Saying, mate, you're complaining about wind turbines, but you just had a Chinook flying over a low cast over the house, seeing the windows rumble. What is your problem?
Well, they might not. Hang on. I mean, I don't know these muppets personally. They might have a problem with the helicopters and with the wind turbines.
Well, it's.
Why are they not? Why are they mutually exclusive? Why can't they have a problem with the wind turbine and with a loud, noisy helicopter, Chinook? It's probably Suella Braverman on her way to a very important photo opportunity.
The only thing I can really think about it is obviously there's a point onto this. Obviously, your producer is trying to get me onto it, which is basically there's such a connection basically between energy in this country to pensions and basically how the economy works, and they're so inclined to each other. If you did actually address the energy in this country by actually getting 100% renewables, but even actually attempting to get 100% renewables is never going to work because you're always going to use coal, you're going to use wood chip. People don't realise it in this country. You fell large forests basically to fill up power generators.
I agree with you. I mean, just the Russian angle should be enough to propel this conversation all the way to legislation, shouldn't it?
What you should say to them very clearly. Say that, right, you don't believe in energy security in this country. Well, then can I just point out to you, you shouldn't be in the position that you are, and potentially you're a traitor.
I was going to use the word traitor. You're very good, John. I like you a lot. And you're doing this thing where you're having a conversation with an imaginary person while talking to me, and at times... When you're
apologies.
No, I like it, but you go, oi, you muppet, don't you do this? And I think, is he talking to me for a minute?
No,
I know that you're not, but just for the benefit of anybody listening,
you don't drive a BMW.
I've never driven a BMW in my life.
If you're not the sort of guy indicates. But like, to bring back in the topic, James. Like,
well, hang on,
Denmark
you're out of time. You're out of time now. I'll let you have one more sentence.
Okay, right. In Denmark at the moment, they're producing a large energy facility just off the core of Denmark, which is going to produce a fourth of all the energy that Denmark needs. Why haven't we got 6 or 7 of those in this country with cost a fraction of the cost it would to produce energy in this country? Again, it's money, money, money.
Money, money, money. Seems so funny in a rich man's world. 10 to 12 is the time. It's a slightly eccentric show today, and all the better for it. So I will respond to this text in good faith. Hi, James. What have Denmark just done? My radio lost Wi-Fi just as your caller said it. Thank you. I can't obviously engage in bespoke responses to inquiries like this on a daily basis. Otherwise, we'd do very little else. But it was some sort of massive offshore clean energy project. I mean, you could Google it, like the lady who asked me how many birds die every year as a consequence of wind turbines. I'm going to go out on a limb there, Martine, and say not as many as KFC. But who knows? Ruben's in Liverpool. Ruben, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
I don't oppose wind power as an option, hypothetically speaking, but I think in terms of renewables, there's better things to be investing in potentially.
Is it either or? Is it not that we should be investing in a whole array of things? What's your favourite?
Of course we should be. Of course, if we could, we should be investing in everything. I mean, my favourite in terms of efficiency, I'm pretty sure hydro is about 90% efficient, as opposed to wind, which is more like 30 or 40%. Solar, I know, is even lower, more like 20% efficiency, although the more we invest in it, the better the tech is getting. But then solar has a very low initial cost. You could install solar panels on thousands of roofs.
I see a lot on canal
much more
boats.
Quickly and cheaply than you would, like your previous caller said, takes 8 years to set up a wind turbine plot. He also mentioned...
Someone thought he said 8 hours. I got a text.
Yeah, but that's without regulations. I presume that's just the actual setup time potentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Or once it's set up, how long it takes to get it running.
Geothermal is the way. Geothermal is the way. That's what we could call Theo's podcast, isn't it? Geothermal is the way forward. A lot of people are telling me. I think I heard something on the radio this morning about that being. Is that as you dig down into the ground to get heat? Is that what geothermal?
Yeah, geothermal. You're trying to harvest the heat from the Earth's core, so you have to dig very deep.
But I think I heard on the radio when you got the radio on and you're just waking up. Does this happen to you and you can't remember whether it was actually the news or whether you dreamt it? Because the news comes on as my alarm. I'm pretty sure this morning, be the 7 o'clock news, I'm pretty sure I heard about geothermals or no? Am I imagining this? Was I actually dreaming? It's an odd thing to dream about.
It's been talked about for years, James, and to be honest, I think it's a fantastic option if it's a realistic option. Now, as I say, I remember hearing this talked about 15 years ago and how we were on the brink of it. It's a bit like nuclear fusion. We always seem to be on the brink of it and we never get there. It's a very expensive setup. Again,
here it is. They found there's a machine capable of digging the world's deepest hole could potentially unlock enough renewable energy to power the entire planet, according to its creators. That must be the story, because that was in the Independent yesterday. That must be what I heard this morning on the radio.
Yeah, as I say, James, I think it's an excellent option if we can achieve it. But I think it's very, very expensive. Like nuclear fusion, we always seem to be on the
way off. Yeah. So your favourite would be solar and hydro, then?
I think so. I think solar is probably the cheapest in terms of entry cost. Obviously, as you say, it shouldn't be one. We should be investing in all of them. But if there is a government, a limit to what they can spend or what they're going to allot to renewables, then I think personally that the priority should be solar on individuals' roofs, grants for that. We know that it improves
and the question of why it doesn't happen is probably very, very think tanky, isn't it? It's probably the idea that if you think back to the global warming debate and the way that people like Nigel Lawson were able to somehow end up being treated as equal and opposite authorities to actual genius scientists, they've done the same with all this kind of stuff because somebody somewhere is paying big bills.
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously, if every house in the UK with a south-facing roof had solar panels on it, you'd have far fewer consumers paying for their electricity, particularly in the summer months, but all throughout the year you'd have far less
we'd be a lot
for the
less,
oil and gas companies.
We'd be a lot less reliant on countries or governments that may turn out to not have our best interests at heart. You don't have to be Ukraine to be feeling the pinch of Russia's invasion, as we are constantly being reminded. Thank you, Ruben. Lovely stuff. Joseph's in Stroud. Joseph, what would you like to say?
Right. So, a very interesting conversation. Thank you very much for having me. It's very important that we do. So there's a political reason why we're not building wind and solar everywhere, and that's because not voters in general, but Tory voters in the shires are NIMBYs is the wrong word to use.
What is it?
But there's definitely a flavor of NIMBYism thrown into this.
Yes, I think so.
And then there's also a technical reason why we wouldn't necessarily want to just cover the whole country in wind and solar. No. As much as that would generate gargantuan amounts of energy, the trouble is that our energy grid, as is currently constructed, is a very finely balanced machine in which supply and demand have to match each other equally on a pretty much nanosecond basis. Otherwise, substations and stuff like that will start overloading.
Yes. I do understand all of this so far.
You get all of that, yeah. So, wind stop, but this is also for everybody out there in your listeners. Wind stops blowing for half a second, all of a sudden your power drops out. Wind starts blowing really quick, all of a sudden your power spikes. So the balancing of that whole thing, putting wind and solar like that on, makes the balancing of our grid incredibly difficult.
And that's only one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is fluctuating demand, of course, as well.
This is it, fluctuating demand as well. But the demand fluctuation is much more predictable than the supply fluctuation.
But no one's suggesting that we flick a massive switch overnight and go from where we are now, go from traditional now to 100% renewable. And I genuinely think...
But even so,
go on.
I want to put solar on my roof. I think it's great. I have to check with my local electricity board to make sure that they can handle that supply fluctuation.
Do you?
Before
for your one little roof? How big's your house?
It's not that small, but it's a glorious roof for it. It's south facing.
You couldn't produce enough energy on your roof to mess with the local substation.
No, but if everybody
did
it,
yeah. Oh yeah, no, all right, I get that. That's all right. I misunderstood you.
You see what I mean?
Of course I do.
They have to be able to manage that, and it's for them to do that. So yes, I have to check with them before I do it. It's one of the hoops you have to jump through.
Fair enough. No, but again, I think we keep coming back to the same point, which is no one is suggesting that we go all in on this overnight. And the technology and the efficiency, even perhaps the consistency, will improve with the more work that is done and the more investment that is made and the more research that is completed.
Put into it. Yeah, absolutely. It will. It'll improve. I mean, the other side of things is, there are other ways to produce clean energy.
Yes.
We could go all in on nuclear and, research new nuclear developments. And I'm not talking fusion because I don't know if we'll ever make that work. We do have proven technology. We could go all in on geothermal or a mix of all of them. But, if you got to pick one, nuclear is great because it's proven and it works and it's steady.
Yeah, but wind is presumably a hell of a lot cheaper.
And solar's much faster.
Yes, exactly, and you can get a measurable difference made in the shortest amount of time. I like, and apart from that sort of quasi NIMBYism. Where else? Why would, for example, David Cameron, a former Conservative Prime Minister, admittedly his constituency's in the Cotswolds, but why would he pledge not to help subsidise the building of wind turbines? What's the political win for someone like him?
Well, in part because his constituency is in the Cotswolds. I mean, it's perfect for solar, or it's perfect for wind, and it's perfect for solar. But also, I mean, I don't know. Is there any way to check the list of
donors, official donors, nothing illegal? No one's suggesting that for a minute.
Not official donors, but even MPs' interest.
Statements of interest. You're right. I don't know. I mean, he ended up doing a little bit of work for a very sort of interesting organisation there, didn't he? During COVID, during coronavirus. Good Lord, that was an absolute cesspit, wasn't it? What was going on there on the financial side of things, even as people up and down the country were dying. And that leads me, almost like I planned it, into the conversation we'll have in the next hour. Now, before Chris Moores, my good friend, got slung out of the jungle last night, and I think it's now safe to talk about him because he'll be in bed, won't he, in Australia? He'll be tucked up in his bed with his little hat on. I haven't watched as much of it as I intended to. I've just been really busy. There's been a lot going on, not least the football subsequently. So has Matt Hancock pulled it off? I really hope not. It is 3 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And shall I mention the football result, or are people... I never know what to do on this, because you might be listening to me in order to avoid the football result. I don't know. Anyway, the game, the Iran-Wales game is over. So if you want to know the result, then find out. I don't do that thing they used to do in the olden days when you say, if you don't want to hear the results, then turn your radio down or turn your television off. Iran-Wales is now over. 4 minutes after 12 is the time. I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here is not over. I didn't really want to do this phone-in because I really, really fear the answer that I'm going to get. When we first started talking about the fact that Matt Hancock, the former Secretary of State for Health, was going into the jungle on ITV without the permission of either his party or his constituents, I somewhat pompously felt that it was really awful. I felt that it was an appalling abuse of Parliament. I thought it was disgusting when Nadine Dorries went in as well. It didn't do any harm to her career in the Conservative Party. But I also felt ITV had done something quite wrong, something a little bit too cynical for the even for that medium. And as those words came out of my mouth, I knew I was being a bit of a plonker. You can't criticise a television company for doing something that's attracting so much publicity, including the fact that you're talking about it in the first place. There's probably a line, isn't there? There's probably a threshold beyond which we'd all agree. You know, we don't want to see a real-life Squid Game, do we, or a real-life Hunger Games, but the likelihood of that happening is not zero at some point in the world. But my attention has been brought back to the programme because Chris Moyles got chucked out last night. And Matt Hancock is still there. Now, I don't know whether or not Matt Hancock is still there because people want him to stay there in order to do more humiliating tasks. I watched the first few episodes and he was being picked for almost everything. And I found myself responding in a way to that I did not welcome or enjoy. I found myself responding to the fact that Chris Moyles, beg your pardon, that Matt Hancock was being elected to do all of the unpleasant challenges. I found myself responding with something that felt a little bit like sympathy. So I stopped watching it because the last thing I want to feel for Matt Hancock with his nonsense about throwing a protective ring around care homes, the last thing I wanted to feel for Matt Hancock was sympathy. I don't care how many kangaroo testicles he had to eat or how many rat-infested sewers he had to swim through. The last thing I wanted to feel about Matt Hancock was sympathy. And I think I started feeling a bit of sympathy. He has a Tiggerish element to his personality. You know, it felt like the stocks from a medieval period where there's a tipping point at which everyone who is relishing the opportunity to throw rotten tomatoes, and maybe some people would have quite liked to throw something worse, but throwing rotten tomatoes at Matt Hancock, there's a tipping point where the bloke in the stocks starts earning the respect of the people throwing the tomatoes. It's a tipping point where you start going, oh, fair play, though. You know, fair play to him. He's taking it. It's what you say, isn't it? You take your punishment when you're raised. You take your punishment like a man. I don't like him, but he took his punishment like a man. It's a slightly sort of toxic masculinity feel to it, that rhetoric, but you're familiar with it. So there comes a point where the bloke, however much enthusiasm you are deploying to hurl rotten tomatoes at this fella, there comes a point when he's been hit by so many rotten tomatoes that you sort of have an emotional response. If you're built like me, and I suspect you probably are, if you're still listening after all these years, if you start feeling a swell of human sympathy, a swell of compassion, and you don't want to, because it's the bloke who did the thing. and you forget that he's the bloke that did the thing. You can't remember why he's in the stocks in the first place because somehow your emotions conspire to create a feeling of sympathy or compassion. I hope I'm wrong. But 2 newspaper columns today turn their attention to Matt Hancock's presence in the jungle. One somewhat predictably, one in a little bit of more of a nuanced way. And they both created, in my mind, the idea that perhaps Matt Hancock's hopes of rehabilitating himself would come to fruition. The first is one of the finest journalists putting pen to paper in this country at this time, and that is Caitlin Moran in the Times newspaper, who writes, "A week is a long time in politics, but in reality TV, it's a series of wildly varying lifetimes. Remember when, only 10 days ago, Matt Hancock arrived on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, to almost universal opprobrium and borderline riot. If he wins, I'm handing in my crown," said former King of the Jungle, Chris Biggins. And people queued up, us included, to throw rotten tomatoes at him, to abuse him in the roundest terms. And then the headlines started. Matt Hancock survives public vote. I'm a Celebrity viewers are warming to Matt Hancock. Christopher Biggins says he thinks Matt Hancock will make it to the final 3. It's Matt Hancock's show, says Nadine Dorries. Sad Matt Hancock montages hit on TikTok. Matt Hancock dance memes go viral. For the first 5 days, he went for a stoic can-do vibe when the public voted for him to undergo every disgusting challenge. And then what Caitlin calls the underdog sympathy reflex kicked in. And there are a few things more British than the underdog sympathy reflex. This is what worries me. So he goes from masochistic public punishment to I know I made a mistake to I'm just looking for forgiveness to dazzling reinvention as a gonkish public schoolboy just trying to get through this crazy trip called life. And then the Sun reports on Tuesday, I'm a Celeb fans in dramatic U-turn, saying they now want Hancock to win. It's currently on about 25% of the vote, so there's a chance. 2 black female TV presenters and Boy George were voted off before him, before the lockdown adulterer and the Member of Parliament for West Suffolk. Since Caitlin filed her piece, Chris Moores has been voted off as well. I'll say it again, she writes, still dizzy with disbelief. Matt Hancock is a genius. And one of the ghoulish Daily Mail columnists today goes further and writes some bilge about how even Tories can be nice guys. So I was right. When I felt those vague stirrings of something like sympathy, I was suffering from a very, very serious case of the British underdog sympathy reflex, which is why I stopped watching it. Because I do not want to feel sorry for Matt Hancock. So you've watched more of it than I have. Has he done it? Has he pulled it off? Is he going to emerge from the jungle? I heard yesterday that there was one TV show almost signed off for him and his partner to present together. What do you make of it all? And let's not allow this to become bogged down in the light-hearted approach to the story. If you blame Matt Hancock for something that happened to you or your loved ones during lockdown, how do you feel about his apparently successful reinvention of himself as a sort of light entertainment media figure? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So there's a serious question and a slightly sillier question here. The serious question, as ever, is a lot more important than the silly question, but the silly question needs to be answered before we can even turn our attention to the serious question. The numbers, the statistics, the newspaper coverage, and now the finest columnist working in the country today have all concluded that, yeah, he's pulled it off. Not that they wanted him to, certainly, but he has somehow managed to rehabilitate his reputation, which means even if you are outraged and disgusted by that, you have to acknowledge the possibility that he deserves it. That somehow he has successfully persuaded the British public that he deserves a second chance or deserves a rehabilitation of his reputation. He deserves a new career. I can't believe I'm saying these words. But then again, I can't quite believe I stopped watching it because I was worried I was beginning to feel a scintilla of sympathy for the man. The phone lines are now open, 0345 6060973. I'll indulge a modicum of excellence when it comes to, not excellence, of analysis of the actual programme, but I'm not that interested in things like Colin's contention that, don't be silly, the final three will be Jill Scott, Mike Tyndall and Owen from Hollyoaks. That seems fairly likely to me, but that's not the question. I'm not asking, is he going to win? I'm going to ask, actually, this will sound quite clever, Colin, thank you for the tee up. I'm not asking, is he going to win? I'm asking, has he already won? Has Matt Hancock already won? Has he won a reprieve? Has he won a rehabilitation? Has he won a revision of his reputation among the British public? It looks to me like he has. Which means I've got two more questions for you. Why? Why have you softened? If you listen, ideal call on this one, someone who was as angry as I was when he went in, or is not even angry, were we? Just disgusted. You're as disgusted as I was when he went in, and now you think he's all right. Because when you felt those scintillas of sympathy starting to seed in your stomach, you carried on watching. You didn't do what I did and put on a Queen Latifah, the Equalizer episode, which is infinitely better than pretty much anything else on television ever. You didn't flick back to Queen Latifah. You carried on watching Matt Hancock in the Jungle, and those little seeds of sympathy sprouted, and they became saplings of sympathy, and the saplings of sympathy began to grow, and they became plants of sympathy, and the plants expanded, and now you have a mighty oak of sympathy sitting where once your disgust at Matt Hancock's existence, never mind his presence in the I'm a Celebrity jungle, was residing. Wow. 15 minutes after 12 is the time. I've also got a Woke Watch. Do you remember Woke Watch? We used to do a thing called Woke Watch. It was great fun. Got a theme tune, got everything. I've got one of the best Woke Watches ever coming up for you today, if I can remember to tell you about it. 90 minutes after 12 is the time. Chris Moore's mentioned you this morning on Radio X and said he tried to channel you when he was asking Matt Hancock questions in the jungle. He said he had to split in his head the Matt in the jungle and the man that he knows is a politician, etc. He had a lot of interesting things to say about it. He's a very interesting man, Chris. I can't wait to hear more of what he's made about his time in there. But I understand what he means by that. You can't sit there being a Newsnight presenter if you're doing I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. You have to sort of interact with the human being. That's what Matt Hancock was banking on. Has it paid off? Has he already won? Is he rehabilitated? And if he is, how does that make you feel as someone utterly unmoved by his shenanigans? Francis is in Rochester. Francis, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a bit of a madness, really. I'm like, what is he doing in there? I haven't changed my mind at all. For me, this is going to sound like a bit of a rant, and I'm really sorry to everyone listening.
It's a right show.
I'm literally getting it off my chest.
Yeah, good. That's what we're here for.
Because I feel like I'm in some really weird other world watching this all happen and unfold, and I'm like, is anybody else seeing this? I just feel like...
So you see him...
He's the biggest snake in the jungle for sure.
Is he?
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like that he's sort of turned people around. I'm like, no, has everyone not sort of remembered what he's done and how he totally mismanaged, the pandemic and how...
But as I read it, and you've been watching it more than I have, the thing he's apologising for is either cheating on his wife or getting caught cheating on his wife. He's not actually apologising for anything that he did in his role as Secretary of State for Health. As I read it.
No, of course not. Of course,
Yeah.
But isn't there going to be a massive inquiry when he comes out? Won't he have to face the music eventually?
Yeah.
Won't he have to face that? So what he's trying to do now is drum up public support. In the most, it's such like I'm so angry about it, I can barely speak. It's just like it's
You're
so
doing a good job.
obvious. You haven't heard half of it yet, James. Do you know what I mean?
But you're very much of the view that he has pulled it off. You're cross that he has, but he has.
Yeah, because he's still in there.
But is that not? There's no argument for saying he's still in there because people want him to eat more kangaroo testicles or swim through more rat-infested sewers. What?
The thing is, there's nothing he could do that could redeem what he did during the pandemic.
Well, I agree with that. I agree with you.
He could eat a mountain high of camel cock. Do you know what I mean? Oh, excuse me. Should I have said that?
Well, listen.
And that's now his surname, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I'm going to have to move on. I don't even know whether we got the dump in there. I pressed it? Did you press it? Just me press it. Okay. Well, if that rude word did sneak out, it's been quite a show today. It's not a full moon, is it, at the moment? If that rude word did sneak out, then I can only offer up apologies. But we were talking about the genitals of exotic animals, so there was always a danger, I suppose, that something of that nature may just sneak under the wire. She did say that she was had a lot to get off her chest. Eileen's in Orpington. Eileen, thank you. What would you like to say?
I run a charity called Compassion and Care, and also an organisation called The Whistler, to support whistleblowers and families of those in care homes. During COVID, we had a 60% increase of calls to our helpline, mainly from whistleblowers within care homes. We published 42 special reports on anonymised helpline data, raising serious issues that were going on in care homes at the time. Each of those reports was sent directly to Matt Hancock at the time. Had he acted on a single one of the issues or even responded, full stop, I presume he didn't respond due to dyslexia.
You're being sarcastic, I think.
I am being sarcastic. I am absolutely outraged. I got to admit, of all the years that I've run a helpline, I wept during the COVID.
Oh, Eileen.
Whistleblowers.
Yeah.
Who lost their jobs for having integrity, for having courage, for speaking out. People that were on a minimum wage are today without work, and Matt Hancock is on the front page of newspapers as a celebrated person. I think there's something very wrong with this country.
I needed you to ring in today, Eileen. You know that, don't you?
I'm sorry for being upset.
Don't be.
People died gasping for breath without oxygen in residential care homes with no medical attention.
Can we be 100% confident that this could have been, a lot of it could have been avoided with better leadership?
Yeah. If it had been anybody else, they could have got someone from a bus stop and they would have done a better job. It's not as if he didn't know what the issues were. We were writing detailed reports saying, please don't put people with COVID into care homes, because in care homes people wander with dementia from room to room and it's not like a hospital ward. All those kind of issues, we were raising them in detail. We were telling him what whistleblowers were saying. In hundreds of them, hundreds of care staff spoke out.
And
how do those care staff feel today seeing Matt Hancock being celebrated in this? How do they feel? Absolutely betrayed.
I presume they do, and they're telling you.
And I've got to admit that every day I deal with people with courage and integrity. Hours and hours every day. That's what I come up against. So maybe my tolerance of absolutely appalling people is lower than most.
I don't know. I mean, I'm going to ask you a question that it will sound silly.
Yeah.
But it's respectful. Actually, no, I'm going to tell you something and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, all right?
Okay.
You couldn't bring yourself to watch this programme, could you?
Oh, absolutely not. I've never seen it.
No. But you're doing what I'm doing. You're looking at the reaction and you're reeling. You're going.
Yeah, I'm reeling from the news, but I think that the actual concept of celebrity has somehow marred this country. I'm quite grateful that Harold Shipman's not alive, or I'm a celebrity would have him on there to be rehabilitated.
Blimey.
I mean, it's got to the point where we need to look at this celebrity culture and think about our values and about what's right and what's wrong, and should entertainment not reflect our values as human beings? Most people, knowing what Matt Hancock has done, most people, if they'd been on the end of our helpline, there would be no viewers of I'm a Celebrity. There'd be 0 viewers. If they heard what we've heard, there wouldn't be any programme.
And your views, what you say about the overview, the bigger picture about the the relationship between behaviour and celebrity is quite jarring, actually. The idea that no one, and obviously, you're not drawing parallels between Matt Hancock and Harold Shipman in any direct fashion. You're simply pointing out, is there anything you could do in public life that wouldn't result in you being fair game for a cynical television show?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
producer.
It's absolutely appalling. The programme, they should be ashamed.
Right. Well, I'm going to be tough with. No, I'm going to be tough with you. I'm going to give you some tough news. I think he's going to get at least a short career off the back of this. I think there's a couple of TV shows in the pipeline that his people are talking to broadcasters about. I think that he is trying to reinvent himself as a sort of Ed Balls figure, and that it's probably, as things stand, it's probably succeeded, Eileen.
Well, we're just going to keep fighting and to get the truth out there. We submitted our report. The reports that were ignored by Matt Hancock are on our website. They've been submitted to the COVID inquiry. We'll keep fighting for those carers that lost everything and today who struggle to have food whilst this debacle is going on the TV and in the media. I do notice as well that the media never covered the Moan story. And yet, Matt Hancock's all over the front pages.
They have covered the Moan story, actually.
The Guardian have.
No, it has been in all the other papers as well. Admittedly, not as prominent as it was.
On the news last night, it wasn't. No,
mentioned. It hasn't received the level of coverage that I would have liked to see. I mean, part of the reason for that, if you're interested, is not there's some hidden agenda or priorities. It involves allegations that if it's proven, if she ends up in court or anything like that, I promise you it'll be on the news at 10.
I suppose, well, we had care staff that were using sanitary towels for PPE. So, and we had care staff that told us they were told to get used PPE out of dustbins. So obviously, it affects those issues quite a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. I am angry, and I hope I'm always angry. I wish there were more people that were angry and disgusted by the Matt Hancock thing. There might be hope.
Well, I'll tell you something, if you let me.
Yep, sorry.
No, I mean it. There will be now. There will be more people who are angry about this than there were before you came on this programme. I promise you.
Oh, thank you.
I mean it. I absolutely promise you. And I'm one of them. I mean, you can do it in a serious fashion, this sort of conversation. You can do it in a less serious fashion. And then along come you to remind us all of what was at stake here and what an absolutely appalling episode it is in the relationship between politics and popular culture. Should never have happened, should it? And it breaks my heart, actually. I don't even know if angry is the right word. It's why I stopped watching it, because it was beginning to. I could tell it was working, and now we know that it has, and we owe it to the people you've been talking about. Even if we can't turn this oil tanker back around, we at least owe it to carry on heckling, don't we?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope so.
Let me know if you need anything else. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Eileen. You take care. Well, 12:30 is the time. Amelia Cox is here now with the headlines. 12:34 is the time. Clip of Brian Cox from this week's Full Disclosure. Special episode. Yeah, it is an episode of Woke Watch, and some more calls on Matt Hancock, although I think Eileen's words will resonate with all of us. Louise has been in touch. Say thank you to Eileen, who just rang in, for speaking for so many of us. Mariam says, superb call from Eileen. Anger is a great motivator. For our loved ones, we must stay angry. I was angry before Eileen called and remain angry over the crazy reaction to a stupid television programme and the popular viewer response to this total madness. It's a shame you haven't watched more of it, James. It would be clearer why he is still in the camp. On the whole, people don't like bullies, and none of those left in are bullies. They have been booted out. Well, I mean, if you're choosing between a bully and someone who many people consider to be responsible for their loved one's death, a bully on a game show, then yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know if I would have ended up understanding it any better. That's the problem, is that you're engaging in the rubric of a game show when you talk like that. They're in a jungle. There are always going to be some people that are more robust in their treatment of their fellow campmates than others, and there will always be people who call them bullies. But it's the rubric of the game show. And the contention of people like Eileen and me is that there should be some public behaviours too egregious to permit you to be allowed into these environments, someone will say that's just too awful. You can't put him on a game show because of what he's done. And I don't mean cheating on his wife and being filmed with his mistress. I mean appalling decisions, appalling absence of clarity and leadership during the entire coronavirus pandemic. Although, in the interest of full disclosure, I thought at the beginning of it all that he was kind of the only one that managed to maintain a semblance of humanity. Good God, how the scales fell from my eyes. Tracy's in Finchley. Tracy, what would you like to say?
First of all, I'd like to send loads of love to Eileen. Her call was incredibly moving.
Absolutely.
Secondly, the dump button didn't work, but it was very funny.
Yeah, thanks for that. Let me apologise again for that. Just in the interests of belt and braces, I had obviously tried to remove that from the record, but failed. So my apologies for anybody offended by the description of the camel's appendage. Carry on.
Thirdly, my husband and I went for the first time to the Chelsea Flower Show this year, and we walked past Matt Hancock with his girlfriend.
Oh.
And you know what? We both turned to each other and said, which was the most weird and awful thing.
Yes.
Bloody hell, he's really good looking.
Oh, no.
And we were, yes,
Okay.
we were horrified. So that's a bit of perspective. I thought, I couldn't believe he's really handsome and he smelt good. I mean, it was like that bad.
Okay.
And I was like,
You're making me feel a
Anyway,
bit poorly now.
I know. That's how I felt, and that's how
Fair
my
enough.
husband felt. And believe me, my husband doesn't normally notice handsome men. That's how weird it was.
This is worse than I feared.
I know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think he's very clever, and he's thought about every single word that he has said, every single move that he has made. And I think that there are some dark forces at work getting students who, for a free bar of chocolate, have downloaded the app and voted 5 times for free.
But this is at odds with what we're discovering today. The media coverage, the way people are responding, in my inbox, loads of people have fallen for it.
No, I haven't fallen for it. I haven't fallen for it. I think he looks like Hugh Laurie as Prince, whatever his name is, in Blackadder. He's got the same facial movement. I think he's absolutely
More sort of Tim Nice but dim type of sort of.
Not even. I think more the.
But Hugh Laurie's character was nice in Blackadder. You mean the Prince
Yes,
George? No, but he was lovely.
Prince George. Yeah, he was. Yes, well, but he's got the same sort of weird facial expressions. I think he's just trying desperately to give himself a career after politics. But I really do think that there are people voting. When Chris Moyles left yesterday, and I'm afraid to say I have watched everyone,
yes,
but I haven't voted for anybody because I don't vote. I don't do that. But when Chris Moyles got to Anton Deck and he said, "Oh my God, I cannot believe that Matt Hancock is more popular than me," some alarm bells rang. I'm thinking he's not more popular than Chris. Chris Moyles was hilarious and sweet and absolutely useless at getting stars, whereas Matt Hancock threw himself into everything, but is just so unlikable.
Well, there is a fat constituency of people out there who disagree with you. So here's an example that someone sent me. It's not someone who would ordinarily end up in my timeline. All the votes for Matt Hancock. He hasn't bitched, moaned or bullied a single person in there. He's done all the tasks, remained pleasant and amiable throughout. That's why he's more popular than you, Chris Moyles. He's everything you're not. So, people, if anyone understands how easily people can be manipulated, it's going to be a Conservative politician, isn't it, in the current iteration of the party? And just to challenge you on something else, if I may, Tracy.
Yes, please.
I've just had a message from a colleague who shall remain nameless.
Okay.
And they say, I was inches from Matt Hancock when he did your holiday cover. He is not good looking. He looks he looks gormless. His mouth is half open all the time.
Well, I wasn't that close. He literally walked past me. But we both looked at each other and said, oh, gosh, he's handsome.
Well, I think I should probably have cut you off when you said that the first time. But I'm definitely moving on now. You've said it twice. Thank you, Tracy. It is time now for... Hang on, no, don't, hang on. Oh, Lord, it's been one of those shows today. Have I got the thing in front of me? Yeah, right, okay. Right, time now for...
Woke Watch.
An unhappy ending as woke generation spurns fairy tales. This is a story, inevitably, in the Daily Mail. Once upon a time, children's books were filled with enchanting stories about monsters, magic and princesses in need of rescue. But it's grim news... You get it? It's grim news for the Traditional fairy tale which is under threat in today's world of woke. 9 out of 10 adults under 30 think fairy tales are inappropriate and outdated, according to a survey. Now, what I love about this story, and as I speak, I've got a feeling we've done this before as Woke Watch. Have we done this before as Woke Watch? Because the original versions of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales are absolutely gross. And clearly, anybody reporting on this story about Sleeping Beauty. Prince Charming's kiss is considered inappropriate by some because Sleeping Beauty did not give her consent. Do you know what the original Sleeping Beauty is? Because they're claiming that now people are objecting to the original stories because they are woke, the people are woke. That's not the original story. The one that these people think is the original story involves a king finding a woman who's asleep and well, yes, that thing, even though she's asleep. She then gives birth while still asleep. The child wakes her up by sucking a splinter from under her finger, and the story culminates in the king trying to kill his wife, because he was married even when he sexually assaulted Sleeping Beauty, after she attempted to trick him into eating his own children. So Social Progress had already rewritten Sleeping Beauty because the original was too unpleasant, even in the Three Little Pigs. There's a case for arguing that it had become unsanitized. The Frog Prince, the original Brothers Grimm version, the princess throws the frog into a wall in an effort to force him to turn back into a prince. In a darker version still, it isn't a kiss that transforms the frog into a prince, but cutting off his head. Everywhere you go, that's the point about folk tales, is they were incredibly dark. And as society has progressed, so society has made them less dark. So the idea that there's something particularly woke about this generation and its relationship with fairy tales is palpably ridiculous, because people have been softening and sanitizing the Brothers Grimm fairy tales since they were written. Oh, nice to get back to.
Woke Watch.
Time to get back to the jungle. Tim's in Hove. Tim, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome. Do you find Matt Hancock attractive?
Now you've stumped me, and I might have to end the call.
Carry on.
No, I don't think he's particularly attractive.
Looks like Homer Simpson, John says. John says he looks a bit like Homer Simpson. He does look like a sort of non-yellow Homer. Anyway, that's not why you rang in.
He's a bit weird looking.
Yeah.
Digressing from my point of calling, but I would suspect that he's probably, if you know him personally, he's probably not a bad guy. He's just utterly useless. But my point is that I think him and people like him, I think there's a huge number of them at the moment in British politics, especially on the right, I have to say. They don't go into politics because they have some overarching philosophy of how British society should be, or any burning ambition to serve the public. They go into politics in order to become famous, to get money, to live a lifestyle that is associated with high office. And I think for that reason, that level of cynicism translates into what we're seeing now with Matt Hancock in the jungle. And if you look at the guy who hired him as health secretary, can you tell me what Boris Johnson believes in? Can you tell me what Matt Hancock believes in?
Do you know, has it gone out yet, the Alan Johnson full disclosure? It hasn't. There's a full disclosure. I wasn't asking you, but you can answer it if you want. The Alan Johnson full disclosure was really interesting to me in the context of what you say, because I asked him, I often ask politicians what their proudest achievement is. And Alan Johnson, who went on to hold some of the great offices of state, but was, of course, a big trades union official before he went into Parliament, he said it was probably the compensation. I don't think he said probably. You're going right back now to the early years of the new Labour government, and he said it was the compensation that we got for deep-sea fishermen fishing out of Hull, who'd been completely turned over by the sort of changes in the law and the way that the industry had been let down after their fishing grounds were claimed by Iceland in 1976. And I just thought that was fascinating in the context of what you've just said. If you ask the sort of politicians you're talking about what their proudest achievement is, I honestly think they would say, well, becoming Secretary of State for Health or becoming Foreign Secretary. It wouldn't be something for people.
Why you go back to David Cameron, and someone asked him why he wanted to be Prime Minister, and his famous words were, because I think I'd be rather good at it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a weird one, isn't it?
although you have to say, I think it was Gillian Keegan. I recently is it Gillian Keegan who's now in education?
Yes.
Yeah. And she was interviewed on Radio 4 recently, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along the lines of more Alan Johnson-esque than Boris Johnson-esque, where her proudest achievement was something that she had achieved for ordinary people. So they're not all the same.
No, and they're not all right-wing, and there'll be some appallingly overdeveloped egos on the left-wing as well. But I just thought that this is a nice proof of the point you were making, or a nice illustration of the point you were making. I'd mention that because it's upcoming, actually. Today's Full Disclosure is with Brian Cox, the rather splendid actor, and that is a conversation and a half. It really is. As I mentioned to you yesterday, it's one where I think if anyone ever went to the trouble of counting how many words I say in the course of an hour-long Full Disclosure, this could well be the least amount of words I've ever said in an interview, because he is such a raconteur and such a superb speaker. I'll play you a little clip of it after this. 10 to 1 is the time, and time now for a little taster of this week's Full Disclosure with the marvellous actor Brian Cox, known as Mountain of Camel to his friends, I'm told. He talks a lot of stuff, but if you don't watch Succession, the show about a billionaire media mogul in America and the sort of Machiavellian machinations in both business and his family, then you won't be anywhere near as excited about meeting Brian Cox, in full disclosure, as I was. But it is often stated that it's based on the Murdoch family, and while obviously there are crossovers and parallels, it's a bit glib, that. It's a bit too obvious. It's a bit too crass. And I think that the characterisation of Logan Roy, who came from a very poor background, I think, whereas Murdoch's dad already owned newspapers. So there are all sorts of differences there. And that's roughly where we were when this bit of the conversation unfolded. You talk about having sympathy or empathy for the character Logan Roy. That's why some of the obvious attempts to make it about the Murdochs or about Rupert Murdoch, that's where they fail, isn't it? Because
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, James, because I think that's absolutely true. I think that the point is they're not the Murdochs. No. They are a little bit more aware than the Murdochs, and that's what makes it that's what gives it more edge. So that Logan knows that he's made choices in his life, in the same way that John Caldwell has made choices in his life, and you stand and fall by those choices. It's not for one to judge what those choices are. It's for one to accept that these are his set of circumstances, and you have to acknowledge those set of circumstances and understand that that's part of the human dilemma. That we achieve harmony through considerable cost, but it's worth it. And I think that that's what's so interesting about Logan. I have a great empathy for Logan because I see Logan's journey as one of deprivation.
Yeah.
I don't see it as... I think he is deprived, even though he seems to be the richest man in the world, but he's a very angry man. And he's very angry because there's something that's missing at the fundament of his life, which is love and care that he never had. That he certainly had this mother, but when he went to, the idea was that he was initially the guy was born in Quebec, Canada, and then they changed it and they had him born in Dundee, which they only changed on the 9th episode of the first series. When they came and said, Peter Friedman said, "Oh, by the way, they've changed your birthplace." And I went, "What? They've changed your birthplace?" I said, "You're no longer born in Quebec." Now, I always thought it was odd I was born in Quebec anyway, because I'm not sure if Jesse's very good at geography, because originally he said it's an American character. He's American. As far as I know, Quebec is in Canada. Still. So he would be Canadian. Yes. But that came to me late, because I was playing an American, and then I discovered he was born in Quebec. And then he said, "Oh, you left Quebec very early." I said, "Oh, fine." So he doesn't remember Quebec. He doesn't remember. So I went, "Oh, that's fine." But then when they suddenly, on the 9th episode, Peter Friedman said, "They've changed your birthplace." And I said, "So, what do you mean they changed my birthplace?" He said, "You're no longer born in Quebec." I said, "So where am I born?" And he had to go to his device. He said, "Oh, I can't remember." He went to his device. He said, "Oh, yeah, here it is. You're born in somewhere called Dundee, Scotland." How funny. And I said, delightful. I said, "But that's where I was born." And then he said, "Oh, that's a coincidence." I I said, that's a hell of a coincidence. I said, what is he talking about? I mean, you know, he's born. I'm not born in Dundee. And then I went to Jeremy and Jesse, and I said, and he said, oh, we thought it'd be a little. This is Writer's Fight. We thought it'd be a little surprise, you know. And so, I mean, they do talk to you as if you're about 3 years old and you've just got a bunch of sweeties in your stocking or something.
Pat him on the head, give him a biscuit. He'll be all right. Off you go. Off you go.
Exactly.
Go and do your acting.
Go and do your acting. Exactly. And I just thought, wait a minute. And then he said what he said about Quebec, but he left Dundee very early. You know, so I went, oh, I see.
I told you I enjoyed it. I think it's fair to say he did too. You can download that wherever you get your podcast, but the Global Player app is the best place. And the programme that we were talking about some of the time, How the Other Half Live with Brian Cox, is available to view on Channel 5's catch-up service, My 5. 2 episodes of it. The whole interview, of which you just heard an extract, is available to listen to right now. 12:55 is the time. Last word on Matt Hancock and his putative rehabilitation to John, who's in Stoke-on-Trent. John, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. Thanks for speaking to me. I've been listening for the last couple of years, and you helped me remain sane. I'll be honest with you.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. Ditto. Cuts both ways.
Yeah.
Cuts both ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think you identify the things that the people voting for Hancock clearly don't understand. For me, he represents all the failures that governments have made, and having lost a family member due to government decisions, it's. I'm really conflicted. I love the show. You know, I've watched every episode, but I'm having mixed feelings. But you know, listening to you helps me realise that you know these type of people shouldn't be sort of let off the hook because. Can I tell you the story of my stepdad?
Of course you can.
I know short on time.
Of course you can.
So my mum and stepdad decided to go on a cruise around South America, and they were due to leave March 2020. They ummed and ahed with what was happening in the world, but they went because the government said it was safe to travel.
Right.
Long story short, my stepdad caught COVID whilst on the cruise, and he died in a Florida hospital. So I was on the other end of the phone to my mum when she found out he died, and obviously I had to hit the tough love and think, right, okay, let's get you home. But they tried to quarantine him for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I went to the British government and I asked them for help, and Mr. Gullis said he did everything he could.
Is your local MP?
Home, yes. Yeah. Well, not in my region, but the closest one in my mum's region.
Yeah.
He said everything he could, but he couldn't actually get home. I actually took to Twitter whilst he was pulling out all the strings, so to speak, and got home myself by getting in touch with somebody in Florida. So that was the government letting me down, which still hurts now, and has made me concentrate on politics a lot more, really. But
I can imagine. So you felt yourself, have you felt some sort of stirrings of sympathy for Matt Hancock against your better judgment because of the way the television programme works?
Tiny amounts, but then my eyes are opened and I can see exactly what he's doing.
What is he doing?
Because very clever.
Is he? You do think he's sort of manipulating the camp, as it were?
Without a doubt. And all the public
and the
as well,
public.
because,
I mean, of course, it's the public he's manipulating via the camp, isn't it?
Yes. If I think back to, him forcing those tears when he talked about the lockdown and how ridiculous he looked on the TV when he was doing it.
Yeah.
And then he said he's gone in to highlight dyslexia. I've heard dyslexia mentioned once.
Right.
As he's been in. So I don't know how he's highlighting that. But last night really was the eye-opener of what he's doing and what the plan is. So last night,
Go on.
he was having a conversation with Owen, I think it was.
Yeah.
And he was explaining how governments run. And he was also explaining about the man at the top has very little knowledge of what goes on. It's his advisors advising him, which helps him to make the decisions. And in a way, that's where I think he's being very clever, because he's trying to...
Oh, he's exonerating himself.
Yes, exactly.
Everything
and that's what I think he's doing.
What's the point of being the man at the top then? just for the prizes and the plaudits. John, you've brought me in on time, and I'm so sorry for your loss. And I'm glad that we found the time to talk to you. I hope next time you ring in, it's on slightly happier territory, but a lot of thoughts will be with you, as they are indeed with Eileen for her astonishingly powerful contribution to the programme. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Global Player via Catch Up. You can also, of course, listen to all LBC shows as well as the world's biggest podcasts, including Full Disclosure. And the Global Player is free. Get it from your app store or just head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's Sheila Fogarty. 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 It's Sheila Fogarty.